Doug Wright Awards? I thought they canceled that. All right. Oh, brother. Turn that camera off. Okay, let's get this show on the road.
Welcome to the 16th Annual Doug Wright Awards. Please welcome Chair of the Doug Wright Awards Foundation, Brad Mackay. Or maybe it's McKay. Nobody really ever seems to be sure. Please welcome Brad.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Conan. My name is Brad Mackay, the Chair of the Board of the Doug Wright Awards Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 16th Annual Awards Ceremony. It should go without saying that we're currently living in extraordinary times. I know a lot of you are struggling with self-isolation measures, but speaking personally, I've never been better. In fact, as you can see, things here at the Doug Wright Awards headquarters are outstanding. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, the Doug Wright Awards are a nonprofit arts foundation committed to supporting and celebrating the best in Canadian comics. One of the chief ways we do this is with our annual awards ceremony. The first Wright Awards ceremony happened in May 2005 in a Toronto bar. Since then, we've been fortunate enough to hold our yearly events at the Art Gallery of Ontario and the ballroom of the Yorkville Marriott Hotel, among many other wonderful venues. For our 16th, we decided to hold it in our living rooms. Obviously, this online broadcast is a first for all of us, and you can likely tell by the shaky camera work and fuzzy audio. But to be honest, we initially considered canceling the ceremony altogether. But given the current global situation, we thought it was more important than ever to celebrate this year's nominees in whatever way we could. These are grim days for everyone, especially self-employed artists and cartoonists. So spotlighting them in a creative, engaging, and innovative way that is open to anyone with access to an internet connection seemed the right thing to do. Personally, I believe that art will help us endure the uncertain weeks, months ahead of us. So if any of the books you see here speak to you, I urge you to seek them out and buy them. And if you can't afford to buy a book right now, then promote them on social media and talk about them with your friends. I think it's right time. I think the time is right that we do all that we can to support the arts in Canada. Over the past 16 years, we've handed out more than 24 Wright Award trophies to an all-star lineup of the country's best cartoonists, including Brian Lee O'Malley, Michelle Rebecca-Liati, Julian Tamaki, Joe Ullman, Kate Beaton, Mark Bell, Nina Bunjevac, David Collier, Hartley Lynn, Michael DeForge, Jesse Jacobs, and Seth, to name just a few. We've done this historically in 3 categories. The Best Book Award, the Nipper, which recognizes emerging talent and is given to early career artists who are deserving of wider recognition, and the Pigskin's Peters Award, which is now reserved for the best small press or micro press books. In addition, this year, in response to popular demand, we're happy to announce a new addition to the Wright Awards family, the Egghead. This 4th award, which is named after Doug Wright's early name for his Nipper character, recognizes books for kids aged 12 and under. Winners in each of these categories were chosen by a panel made up of 3 judges. 1 cartoonist, 1 judge working in the comics industry, and 1 judge from either of the above categories, or someone who has deep knowledge and appreciation of the medium. In addition to our 4 categories, we also take time every year to honor comics history by inducting cartoonists into our Hall of Fame, aka the Giants of the North. Another important update this year involves our submission process, which changed to an online system, which allowed authors and publishers an easier way to submit their work. As a result, we received 151 entries across all 4 categories from 36 publishers, plus nearly 3 dozen self-published works. As I'm sure you know, we couldn't do this show every year without our valued sponsors and dedicated volunteers. This year, I'd like to thank Broken Pencil Magazine, sponsor of the Nipper Award, The Beguiling, Datto Creek, and TCAF for their support. In addition, thanks go to our Army of Volunteers. These included Ehab Arafa, Alex Hoffman, Matthew McKinnon, Brian Hunt, Adrian Doran, Hal Nedzwiecki, Jim Monroe, Hartley Lynn, Dakota McFadden, Miles Baker, and Barbara Gould. And if I forget to include anybody here, I'm sure Conan will let me know in the comments. And of course, I'd be at a loss if I didn't recognize our longest serving volunteer, which is Phyllis Wright, who has helped Seth and I present the words on stage every year since 2005. Unfortunately, Phyllis won't be able to join us this year, but I know she's watching. And Seth and I were lucky enough to see her earlier this spring to help her celebrate her 90th birthday party. And we look forward to being reunited with her again next year. Be well, Phyllis. To those watching tonight, I hope you enjoy the show, and we're looking forward to being back on stage in Toronto in 2021. Now, I'm pleased to introduce your host for the 16th Annual Doug Wright Awards. I'm sure you've heard of a captive audience. Well, here's a perfect example of a captive talent. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to welcome the star of stage and screen, Mr. Don McKellar. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Don McKellar. Very happy to be here tonight in my garage to host the 16th Annual Doug Wright Awards. For those of you who have been following, I've hosted these awards before quite a few times, not for a couple of years now because, well, I've been busy. But this year, I happened to have a little bit of free time, 2 or 3 months, and so I was able to squeeze it in. The fact is, I wasn't able to think of a good excuse when Brad called me up, so here I am. For some reason, despite the fact I really have no connection with the comic book world, I have been involved with these awards from the very beginning. I was on the jury for the first awards, which were held in a bar, not much bigger than this actually. A little better attended, but not by much. But what you might not know is even before that, a long time ago, I used to put on my best clothes and present or pretend to present awards to my comic book friends. This was when I was 12. So I think I'm eminently qualified to host here tonight. I feel a little silly, to be honest, dressing up all by myself, but I knew that even if no one else is watching, Seth is out there watching, looking good. So I had to do it. And besides, this is all for you, comics people. And I know this has been a tough time, especially for you, because all your friends and family are calling you up and saying, what about you? Nothing's changed, right? You're still at home doing your little drawings. You never had a job in the first place, and that's not fair. Because I think of you as first responders. Well, not first responders, but essential service. That's not to take anything away from the doctors and the nurses and the garbage men who are doing important work, but they're not entertaining me. And you do, often. I work in film and television, and I've been watching a lot of film and television these days, but very soon we're going to run out of new stuff, and it's all going to come down to you in comics to draw. So, I know not all of you draw. Some of you out there probably just do the words and the dialogue. And for you who might be having a hard time, I've tried to set up my garage to look like a blank comic strip frame. And I thought that you could just do screen grabs of me talking and put in dialogue balloons with funny dialogue. And does that work? Here's another character. Okay, let's get on with the awards. Some things at the Doug Wright Awards never change. For one, the host has to read lots of text. This year written by I don't even know who. But there is something different this year. There's a brand new award. By popular demand, this year represents the debut of The Egghead, the Doug Wright Award for Best Kids Book. Not a book written and created by kids, although that's not disqualified, but a book aimed at children aged 0 to 12. Egghead, by the way, was Doug Wright's original unused name for his signature character, Nipper. Okay, so the finalists for the 2020 Egghead Award are... Just hold on a second. This cue card thing isn't going to work. I didn't really think that out. I'm just going to have to read from the script. The nominees for this year's Egghead Award are Brick Breaks Free by David Craig, self-published. Brick Breaks Free is an original, independent, and laugh-out-loud funny book. Using only visual storytelling, David Craig endears us to a resourceful and sensitive clay superhero. The Worst Book Ever by Elise Gravel, publisher, Drawn and Quarterly. Elise Gravel's Worst Book Ever is a hilarious meta fairy tale with a Greek chorus comprised of trademark Gravel characters who show young readers how to write and critique a book. Gravel's consideration for aesthetic is next level, with a gorgeous color palette and fantastic execution in cartooning for a book whose whole point is that drawings must be the worst. Lunch Quest by Chris Kuzma, Koyama Press. Chris Kuzma has written and drawn a skaterboard comic book all about visual narrative experimentation, trippy characters, and far-out scenarios, making us realize that the world of kidlit needs more psychedelia. This is Chris's second Doug Wright Award nomination. Dakwakata, Warriors by Cole Pauls, publisher Conundrum Press. Dakwakata Warriors is a unique, bizarre, and mesmerizing book, starting with its striking black and red cover. Paul's comic entertains and resonates using traditional language and art to present a futuristic Yukon community and its high-tech superheroes. And finally, Alma and the Beast by Esme Shapiro, Tundra Books. Alma and the Beast resembles a traditional picture book with a lesson for kids about accepting differences, but it surprisingly plays out like an episode of The Twilight Zone, complete with trees and houses made of long flowing hair. The book's painterly illustrations are so lush, stunning, and surreal, they can best be described as bonkers. Okay, here to announce the inaugural Egghead Award winner is Fiona Smythe, former nominee in the Best Book category and the 2019 Giants of the North inductee. Fiona.
And the inaugural winner of the Egghead is The Worst Book Ever by Elise Gravel, published by Drawn and Quarterly.
Congratulations, Elise, on winning the very first Egghead Award. I'm so gratified to see the Doug Wright Awards celebrating children's comics, and so glad that the first winner was such a terrific book as yours. A book that is funny, charming, and the kind of book I wish I'd read when I was a kid. Congratulations.
Just to see the surprise and delight on the winner's faces, it makes it all worthwhile. Of course, I don't know who the winners are. That's all done by the accountants on the day of the awards. But I think it's safe to say if you haven't been asked to call in an acceptance speech, you can relax. Now, our next award is the Pigskin Peters Award, the Doug Wright Award for Best Small or Micro Press Book. The award, given to a book not published by a major press, is named for a popular character from Jimmy Freeze's comic strip Birdseye Center and consists in part a black bowler hat similar to the one worn by the award's namesake, Pigskin Peters. The finalists for the 2020 Pigskin Peters Awards are Boomeries, Volume 9 by Boom, self-published. Boom's recently completed decade-long comic continues in this 9th volume with more slice-of-life scenes about a geeky family balancing working at home, day-to-day chores, and absurdist dreams. Gleam by Freddie Caruso, publisher Piao Studios. On the surface, a collection of short stories, Gleam feels instead like a unified narrative, a handful of sci-fi stories about drugs, parties, and misbehaving in church, and juvenile street gangs. Carrasco's stories ground the rebellious characters by focusing on their vulnerability, blending the finer points of French and Japanese illustration, an uncanny knack for gesture, and the ability to find the exact moment that defines a scene mark the arrival of a major new talent in Canadian comics. Baby in the Boneyard by Jesse Jacobs, publisher Hollow Press. Jacobs' skill with first-person stories of familial alienation, ecological disruption, and cosmic disarray take an even darker turn in this story of a lost toddler who is neither savior for their adopted people, nor of any particular significance for their species. Jacobs explores the limits of bonding, the arbitrary nature of family, and true to form, the starkly deadpan abruptness of violence, awakening, and revolution. This is not for the kids, this one. This is Jesse's 7th Doug Wright Award nomination. He won Best Book in 2018 for Crawl Space. Curb Angels by Lisa Mendes, Christopher Ducharme, Lucas C. Paul's publisher, Bay Press. In the post-punk world of the 1980s, 4 fearless young women from different backgrounds have united to change the world, and they don't care who gets in their way. Christopher Ducharme and Lisa Mendes blend their complementary skills seamlessly in this boundary-pushing tale. And finally, To Jex by Jay Stevens, publisher Black Eye Books. Not many artists could produce such a solid, beautiful collection out of rejected work. The fact that Emmy Award-winning cartoonist Jay Stevens, yes, has done just that is a testament to his finely honed skills. And now, here to announce the winner of this year's Pigskin Peters Award is 2-time Best Book nominee and 2013 Pigskin Peters Award winner, a bit of a favorite around here, David Collier.
Hi, I'm David Collier, and I'm here to talk about the 2020 Pigskin Peters Awards. I have 3 things to say about the awards this year. One is you've caught me at a bad time. Like, I really got to get out to my March to November workspace, and this is actually where I've done my last 4 books. So here we are in Hamilton Harbor. Jen, do you want to make a pan? Oh, you're gonna see it. Look at that's Hamilton Harbor, and that's where I do my best work. So I'm glad you could join me in my workspace. The second thing I want to say is Happy Mother's Day, and that includes you, Jen. And the third thing I want to say is it really sucks that we're doing it this way. You're supposed to get a hat when you win the Pigskin Peters Award. I got a hat in 2013, and I better put it on right now. Look at it. Who's going to win the Pigskin Peters Award this year without a hat? It doesn't make sense. Anyhow, you get this beautiful hat, and it's got this beautiful button on it, right? I wear this hat all the time, all over Hamilton, and it's so sick. So, to cut things to the chase, the winner of the 2020 Pigskin Peters Award is, and all the nominees did great work this year. I'm proud of you all. But this year, the winner is Gleam by Freddie Cresco, published by Piao Studios. Congratulations, Freddie, and hopefully there's a hat for you in your future. All right, happy paddling, happy trails, happy Mother's Day.
Hey everybody, hope you're staying safe over there. Thank you so much to the Doug Wright committee, everybody who voted for me. I couldn't believe when I was nominated, especially looking at the list of the other candidates. You know, and to win is just insane. I was actually supposed to be in Toronto right now for TCAF. Supposed to fly out maybe yesterday, today. But you know, with everything going on, it's crazy how much the world has changed. And I'm excited to see where this takes us, especially in comics, because indie comics specifically is all rooted in the things that we're experiencing. It's sort of a visual record of the times we're in. And I think that's what makes it so exciting, is the honesty in it. Especially in Canada, I think it's the best thing that comes out of Canada. We do a lot of stuff. We do animation, games, but there's something about indie comics that's just really exciting. So I'm happy to be a part of the community. I want to thank Patrick at Piaf Studio, editor, giving me a chance. He sent me an email one day and changed my life. I want to thank my friends back home who I miss tremendously, and my mom, who inspired the second story in the book. Friends, family, everybody. Thank you so much.
Freddie, I'm so glad to welcome you to the Doug Wright Awards and to present you with the Pigskin Peters Award. The book is beautiful, vibrant, exciting cartooning. So happy to see work like this recognized. And so, since you're not here, I'd like to symbolically place Pigskin's Derby on your head and say congratulations.
Oh, sorry. I was just enjoying a nice piece of cantaloupe. Our next award is the Nipper, the Doug Wright Award for Best Emerging Talent, given to an author or a team early in the career and deserving of wider recognition. It's named, of course, after Nipper, Doug Wright's signature character. And the finalists for the 2020 Nipper Award are D. Boyd for Chicken Rising, Conundrum Press. Chicken Rising is a wonderfully strong debut graphic novel from the self-taught cartoonist D. Boyd, a humorous recounting of the 1970s New Brunswick childhood and coming of age of Dawn, D-A-W-N, a character racked with insecurity and troubled with persecution at home and school. Jason Bradshaw for Things Go Wrong, numbers 1, 2, and 3, published by Paper Rocket. Jason Bradshaw accomplishes a small miracle of comics mastery with his fictional recounting of a real-life struggle with mental illness. His flat, almost effectless, highly inventive story slowly gains in emotional power as it unfolds over the course of 3 issues. Sylvia Nickerson for Creation, drawn in Quarterly. Sylvia Nickerson's Creation is a completely original meditation on a number of messily intertwined themes, including motherhood, gentrification, and the struggle of being an artist. In one of many thoughtful twists of convention, she draws her protagonists as faceless blobs and endows the homeless and missing poignant humanity by giving them facial features. Ben O'Neill for Apologetica, Pop Noir editions. Ben O'Neill's Apologetica is an unforgettable selection of 7 short stories that deliver the reader into a nightmarish prediction on the effects of global warming and pollution, along with cartoon martyrdom and spoiled meat. Using limited colors, sharp line work, and surreal and thought-provoking storytelling, Apologetica is a gift from distinct new talent in comics. And finally, Cole Pauls. That's right, Cole Pauls again for Dakwakata Warriors, published by Conundrum Press. Dakwakata Warriors is a language revival comic that is highly original meeting of punk, science fiction, and indigenous culture. The black, red, and white form lines inspired artwork is personal, beautiful, and effective. With this book, Cole Pauls is celebrating and sharing his roots in a way that is at once fun and empowering for indigenous youth. Here, to announce the winner of the 2020 Nipper Award is the legendary Lynn Johnson, the creator of the famous comic strip For Better For Worse and the 2008 Giants of the North inductee. Lynn.
The winner of this year's Nipper Award is Sylvia Nickerson for her fabulous work on the book Creation. Congratulations, Sylvia.
Hi, Doug Wright, and everyone watching this broadcast today. I just wanted to say thank you so much for awarding me the Nipper for Emerging Talent. I want to thank my publishers, Tom and Peggy at Drawn and Quarterly, and Julie and Natalie, who did such an amazing job promoting the book, and thanks for taking a chance on me. I didn't know that many people in the comics community when I wrote Creation, and so having someone willing to publish my book was a huge boost of self-confidence for me as an artist. I really appreciate it. I also wanted to say thanks so much to Peter, Jarrett, and Alex at The Beguiling, who supported me, bought my books, hosted an art show for me. Also, when I wasn't necessarily deeply rooted in the Toronto comics community, their encouragement has really meant a lot. Thank you. I also wanted to thank some new friends I've made in the comics community since Creation came out. So thanks to Michael DeForge and all the people I met at SPX last year who were encouraging and have welcomed me to this very cool space I feel incredibly privileged to be a part of. Thanks to all the writers who reviewed the book as well. Okay, so more personally, I wanted to thank my friends from Casino Art Space in Hamilton, without whom I can't imagine finishing this book. Their youthful enthusiasm for art as something that can truly be transformative in our lives renewed my faith in making art at a time where I really had a lot of doubt about whether it was still something that was worth doing or something I was throwing my time away on. So thanks to all my friends from Casino. You mean so much to me. I also wanted to recognize Seth in his amazing achievement this year for publishing Clyde Fans, a book I really enjoyed. I was surprised not to see it on the list of nominees for this year's Doug Wright Awards. But I hope, even if it's not going to get an award this year, that everyone knows what a career achievement that book really was. And I want to thank the other nominees in this category: Cole Pauls, Jason Bradshaw, Don Boyd, and Ben O'Neill. I can't wait to read your books. They look amazing. When I got the call that my book was nominated this year for the Doug Wright Awards, it felt like a really small little light in an otherwise kind of dark time, and sort of proof that contact with the wider community was still possible while we're all in self-isolation. And I thank the people, the Doug Wright Award committee who run the awards, for continuing to hold the award ceremony and keep bringing us together. It means so much right now to me personally. So I'll just finish by saying that Creation is really about a sense of confinement and being confined to, say, the 7 square blocks around where you live, or being confined to a role as a caregiver, which some of us spend time doing in our lives. And it's about a desire and a longing to kind of transcend the space where you're trapped, maybe. So I feel like this is a theme that a lot of us are going through right now: how to kind of cope, how to hang on, and how to transform ourselves through this challenge that we've been presented with. So to all of you from me, I really wish you all the best, and that this time can be maybe something that we can use to give birth to something completely brand new in both our society and our individual lives. It won't be the same as what we had before, but if we can embrace what can be different, I think it can still be, the possibility for transformation can be exciting. Okay, so thanks so much, and I really look forward to connecting with all of you very soon when this is all over. Bye.
Sylvia, I'm so happy to be presenting the Nipper Award to you. Your book was a wonderful book, human, full of feeling and empathy. I'm excited to see your work being recognized, and you have my congratulations.
Conan asked me to say something about the death of Tom Spurgeon last year. If you're not familiar with him, he was a number of things. He was the organizer of the Columbus Crossroads cartoons. It's CXC, Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. I designed that logo, it's embarrassing. But he was that executive director, maybe is his title. He was the comics reporter, his longtime comics news site. He was the past editor-in-chief of the Comics Journal. He was very beloved, irascible, argumentative, great guy. I was going to just say something off the cuff, but I think it's certain that I'll cry if I do that, so I'm just going to read this thing I wrote instead, and I hope you'll forgive me looking up over and over again, but desperate times. At any rate, here we go. For the last number of months, I've been trying to use Twitter less, which full stop is nice. I've told myself many times that I'd take a break, but of course when you're standing in line, grocery store, or working on a boring freelance job that you really shouldn't have agreed to in the first place, it's really easy to pick up the phone and find yourself hours later embarrassed, loopy, irritated. One weird thing that has helped me resist that urge these days, and which I'm sure Tom would be appalled to have mentioned in any memorial, least of all his own, is that when I do open Twitter on my phone, the tweet it shows at the top from last time I used Twitter on it is Tom's tweet from November 9th of last year, which says, Disney Plus looks exhausting. It's hard to think of a more Tom thing to say. It made me laugh at the time. It makes me laugh every time I open Twitter on that phone and then immediately close it so it doesn't refresh and sort Tom's tweet way back to nearly 6 months ago, excuse me, where it belongs. I know that's very silly, of course. It's the same dumb thing as when someone passes away and people continue to post on their Facebook wall. I hate that kind of thing. On the other hand, according to the Twitter app on that phone, it's been 177 days since I refreshed it. I have a new phone now, but I still don't look at Twitter on it, so that's, I guess, the dumbest possible positive thing to come out of Tom's death. I have to say that I have been and continue to be gutted by the idea of Tom being dead. It really doesn't make any sense at all. Tom was only a little bit older than me, except while I was working in a comic shop through the 90s, he was working for the Comics Journal, which is where many of us came to know him, as an incisive writer with broad tastes and an eye for quality, often well ahead of the rest of us. For me, that Tom, the TCJ editor, Tom Spurgeon, was weirdly different than the irascible, acid-tongued smart aleck he was on the TCJ message boards, which I still think back on with a shiver. Tom could be incredibly kind to you, and then one day later cut you deep, possibly without ever realizing it. I guess most of us are like that, but I remember it more with Tom, because he, after all, was a writer. He had a way with words and could cut or comfort at will and effectively. I didn't really become friends with him until the comics reporter days, and especially after he began attending HeroesCon when I worked there. Sometimes just to cover it for his site, sometimes to moderate some underattended panels, often with the same number of people on the panel as in the audience. Tom was a fantastic talker, even though he acted like it wearied him beyond words. He's a terrible small talker, and once his interest in a conversation ended, his whole body would get bored all at once, and he'd be gone seconds later, which I loved. There are a good many people I don't like, even hate, because they share faults that I abhor in myself. Tom Spurgeon was one of the few people who I loved because of it. His quickness to anger, which I shared, his being occasionally too honest in a way he'd have to later apologize for. That's me. His brittle small talk at shows. How's your con going? How's your con going? Well, did you fly through, the Dallas Fort Worth? And most of all, his propensity, although never stated, but which I've always suspected, for self-loathing over his perceived failures or missing of goals that he'd wanted to accomplish on some internal schedule. There was a great cheerful sadness in that man. But of course, most of us think less of ourselves than we deserve. Tom never missed an opportunity to support a fundraiser, especially if it helped someone meet medical bills or recover after a fire or just simply stay in business, as many businesses in the world of comics struggle to do every year. His emails were warm and complimentary, even if he just ripped a comic of yours in a review. He was that rare thing in a creative community, an honest actor who would call bullshit where he saw it and occasionally allow himself to be called on it too. I miss so many things about him. His long, rambling con reports, which were filled to bursting with his big personality, his strange love of the San Diego Comic-Con, his very sensible love of Kim Thompson, the time he told me that he'd put his foot right through my chest if I ever talked to him like that again, which is a long story. The time in his kitchen where we were up late gossiping with Jaime Hernandez and Katie Skelly and suddenly heard him snoring behind us, sitting up straight in the kitchen chair. His emotionally moving speeches at CXC explaining the value of a person's work before presenting them with a giant check for thousands of dollars. So many things. But mostly I miss Tom's friendship, his complexity, his incredible eye for value in an industry that took way too long to value itself. And most of all, his presence in our world. Tom was always there. If the Wright Awards were being held in a hotel ballroom this year, it's easy to imagine turning your head and seeing Tom leaned way back in one of those two small chairs at the back of the room, smiling. I imagine him smiling like that as he typed his silly, sarcastic tweet about Disney Plus at home in his pajama bottoms, at a desk in his living room, surrounded by stacks and stacks and stacks of comics. I miss you, Tom. Thanks.
Each year, the Doug Wright Awards inducts a new member into the Giants of the North, the Canadian Cartoonist Hall of Fame. And this year's inductee is Walter Ball, longtime Toronto Star cartoonist, art department supervisor, best known for his strip Rural Route. And here to induct Walter is Robert McMillan, the founder and editor of the Encyclopedia of Canadian Animation, Cartooning and Illustration. Robert, take it away.
First of all, let me tell you how happy I am that this quiet, modest man is receiving this recognition. Walter was born 7 April 1911 on a farm near Cookstown, Ontario. He was an only child who, since the family had no tractor, electricity, or milking machines, he had plenty of chores to do. He attended a traditional one-room country school and later went to Cookstown High School, which he reached by driving a buggy in the summer and a cutter in the winter. His first ambition was to be an electrical engineer, but he was needed on the farm, and so he remained there after high school graduation. He had begun drawing from childhood, but it was a hobby. As time passed, however, he came to see this as his exit from the farm to his desired destination, Toronto. he began every 6 months or so to write to the Toronto Star, asking for a job and sending samples. Finally, he got a letter from H.C. Hindmarsh, who was then the Star's manager, asking him to drop in the next time he was in Toronto. Well, the next day, Walter was in the office, and he was hired immediately to do photo retouching, some illustration, at $15 an hour. This was April 1932. It was ironic that about 2 weeks later, his mother forwarded a letter to him that came from another department in the Star, which told him that they were sorry they couldn't hire him because his work wasn't good enough. Until his employment, Walter had been self-taught. Now he took a series of evening classes at the Ontario College of Art, Central Technical School, and Northern Vocational School. Through these courses, he mastered realistic illustration and caricature. The results can be seen in both the Toronto Daily Star and the Star Weekly. His sports illustrations included often both styles. And let me say here that Walter stands with Loose Goose and Dave Elston as among the best sports illustrators in this country. In 1956, Star Management changed the format of the Star Weekly and wanted a cartoon unique to that format. Walter was asked if he knew any cartoonist who could fill that role. Talk about a philosopher without honor in his own country. Instead, he asked management if he could try out. He drew 3 samples, all dealing with rural life, but trying different styles. They chose one, Rural Route, and Rural Route began November 1956, and it ended only when the Star Weekly ended. Rural Route did not alter Walter's working relationship with the Star. He continued to work a full 8-hour day at the office and was made supervisor of the art department at the Star around 1970. It was only in the evenings in his basement studio he worked on Rural Route. He was paid $100 for each half tab he did. Walter retired in 1976, but at the request of management, he continued to work on a part-time basis for another 10 years. He died 18th of February 1995 at the York Central Hospital. As you can gather from what I have said, Walter was already a newspaper illustrator with a quarter-century of experience illustrating features ranging from sports to crime and fact to fiction when he created Rural Route. It immediately touched the hearts of Star Weekly readers and remained their favorite throughout its life. In surveys, it was most often named the most popular feature in the Star Weekly, and it never fell below 3rd place. One survey showed 85% of subscribers read it, an unusually high percentage for any magazine feature. Walter belongs to a tradition among Canadian newspaper cartoonists that begins with Jimmy Fries, extends through Walter, Doug Wright, Lynn Johnson, and Sandra Bell Lundy. All of these cartoonists based their strips on reality. Not in the illustrations, of course, but in the content. In contrast, reality of drawing style in most American cartoons overlays the fantasy of their content. This reality is based on the cartoonist's own experience. That experience, as we shall see, can be fictionalized or come across as almost autobiographical. The autobiographical elements in Doug Wright's family, For Better for Worse, and Between Friends are all clearly visible. For Rural Route, it is more hidden, but as Walter related to me, the house in Rural Route was modeled after the house in which he grew up, the stove after the one in which his mother baked bread, and the mailbox, that was the logo for the strip, was based on the mailbox Walter's father bought for $3 in 1911, the year that he was born. That mailbox remained outside of Walter's home in Thornhill until the end of his life. The characters were combinations of people he knew. For example, Dr. Ripley, a friend who enjoyed ice fishing, appeared in the strip in a reworked fashion. Walter thought there was a lot of Elmer in himself. Walter described Elmer as a man with the best of intentions, but even when he managed to do the right thing, it was usually at the wrong time. I expect this comment reflected a lot of Walter's own humility and stern self-judgment. But unlike Walter, I never saw Elmer as a bit of a stumble-bum. Rather, I saw him as an every person, trying to cope with the world around them, rather than mastering or dominating that world. This is another characteristic that Walter's Elmer has in common with those of the other cartoonists I have mentioned. To illustrate this point, I want to turn aside to Ted McCall, who in my opinion is the father of the Canadian adventure comic strip and the Canadian comic book hero, and compare his feature, Men of the Mounted, with the American syndicated strip, Zane Grey's King of the Mounted. Even in those titles, we see the difference. McCall's title emphasizes a community of trained but still ordinary men coping with the criminal elements in their society. In Zane Grey's strip, we are presented with the apex individual single-handedly overcoming the forces of evil. We see this attitude fully displayed in the Big Little Book, also called Men of the Mounted. It shows the same sense of community, individuals coping with the world around them and helping each other. No masterful individuals here. There are differences. Each of the strips in this tradition reflects a different aspect of the huge changes that occurred in Canada over the period of time from Jimmy Fry's to Sandra Bell Lundy. Shifts that saw Canada change from rural to urban, from communal life, as in Bird's Eye Center, to the nuclear family of Doug Wright's family, and for better or for worse, to the individual interacting with friends in between friends. In this continuum, Walter's rural route occupies a transitional position. Yes, it is about a rural community, but it is not the same community as Bird's Eye Center. In rural route, the mechanized farm and the focus on the nuclear family has replaced the pre-mechanized farm community with its eccentric characters. In an increasingly urbanized Canada, this is the last strip that will deal with rural topics. I wonder what a cartoon strip dealing with today's rural community would look like. It would certainly be very different from Walter Ball's. There is also a change in narrative style. Jimmy Fries was able to submerge his own experiences and observations so deeply in a fictional milieu that no one has ever been able to discover the models of his inspiration. Even Stephen Leacock could not achieve this in his Sunshine Sketches of a Little Town. At the other end of this spectrum, the biographical models for the strips of Doug Wright, Lynn Johnson, and Sandra Bell Lundy are reasonably easy to recognize. Earlier I noted that Walter thought there were large similarities between himself and Elmer. One would never mistake Elmer and Myrtle for Walter and his wife, Olive, both of whom were thorough urbanites. enjoying urban activities like theater, concerts, etc. In short, Rural Route falls between heavily fictionalized accounts based on personal experience and the more or less autobiographical accounts of those experiences that other cartoonists have used. Walter, then, is a part of a shared comic strip tradition with its own distinctive features that extends over almost a century, but at the same time displays features that, due to the changing nature of Canadian society and the preferences of its author, sets it apart from other features of that tradition. Thank you.
I'm happy to see that the Doug Wright Awards are welcoming Walter Ball into the Hall of Fame. I've been waiting a while for this because I've always been a fan of Walter Ball's work. I've collected him for many years, and I'm gratified to see him getting this attention. I only wish Walter were still alive today so that I could tell him how much I've always appreciated the beautiful work he did on his Rural Route comic strip. You know, when I first saw the work, I was quite surprised by it. In fact, I wasn't even sure it was Canadian because it had such a beautiful European brush line to it. In many ways, it reminded me of artists like Hergé or Chaland, which was not really the kind of thing you saw in Canada in the 1950s. So I must say, I'm very grateful that his work is being honored. I'm sorry that Walter is not here, and I'm sorry that he has no family that has survived that we know of. But I can guarantee you this, we will find a good place for this medal for him. And so, symbolically, I welcome you into the Hall of Fame, Walter Ball. Congratulations.
And now, the moment you've been waiting for, our final award for Best Book. But before we get to that, I've just been told that Seth would like to say a few words about Phyllis Wright Thomas, Doug Wright's widow, and one of our strongest supporters. Seth.
Phyllis, this is the part of the show where usually I hug you, and usually Brad's here next to me too. We usually give you some flowers, and we tell you how grateful we are for your support and your graciousness and the kindness you've given us over the years, and how much we've grown to love you, and how much we miss you during this time that's so difficult. And I don't have any flowers. I'm not a gardener. There's nothing outside the house where I could even pick to fake it. So I'm just going to say, I will see you soon, and I'll have that hug, and I'll have those flowers for you.
And now, the moment you've been waiting for, the end of the show. In any case, our final award. The 2020 Doug Wright Award for Best Book. And the finalists are This Place, 150 Years Retold, published by Highwater Press, an innovative and important response to the Canadian 150th anniversary. This ambitious anthology pairs 10 writers and 10 artists to tell Indigenous stories, juxtaposing them in time and place and turning the traditional European historical timeline on its head. The Cursed Hermit by Chris Burton and Alexander Forbes, published by Conundrum Press. The Cursed Hermit exhibits deeply intertwined writing and drawing. It's clear that each creator is thinking of how to best complement the other's impressive talents. And the result of this artistic fusion is a delightfully memorable book. Chris and Burton were nominated for the Nipper in 2018. Bezamina by Nina Bunjevac, published by Fantagraphics Books. Disturbing and deeply complex, Nina Bunjevac has created a masterful work. True to her distinctive style, the illustrations are expertly crafted, and no line is left out of place, no word either. Formatted more like a storybook than a comic, the whole production adds to the feeling that we are reading an old tale full of lessons meant to be gleaned. This is Nina's third Doug Wright nomination. She previously won both a Nipper and a Best Book Award. Agnes Murders by Sarah Levitt, published by Freehand Books. With deceptively simple illustrations and thorough historical knowledge, Sarah Levitt has crafted an engrossing narrative based on a real but obscure woman. Taking us from a small Scottish island to the Canadian gold rush, the historical background feels familiar, yet Levitt's well-crafted storytelling makes no part of this journey feel predictable. Death Threat by Vivek Sharaya and Ness Lee, published by Arsenal Pulp Press. The graphic images and narrative choices made by writer Vivek Sharaya and illustrator Ness Lee boldly capture a well-known real-life incident in a way that offers insight into Sharaya's life as a trans woman of color, as well as transparency into the frustrations and difficulties of the creative process. And finally, Bradley of Him by Connor Williamson, published by Koyama Press. Connor Williamson has somehow created a challenging and cryptic book that is simultaneously engaging and acceptable. Bradley of Him's dense pages and hypnotizing narrative are completely absorbing, pulling the reader into a surreal world of ambiguous characters and sprawling landscapes. This is Connor's 6th Doug Wright Award nomination. He won the Pigskin Peters in 2015. And now, here to announce the winner of the 2020 Doug Wright Award for Best Book, please welcome the Jack Kirby of comics, Chip Zdarsky. Chip.
This year's winner of the Doug Wright Award for Best Book is Nina by Nina Bunjevag, published by Fantagraphics.
Congratulations, Nina, for winning the Best Book Award. And it certainly is a beautiful book, masterful, the kind of book every cartoonist is jealous of. I'm so happy to present you with this award. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in real life so I can give it to you in person. And I just wanted to say that I think, if my memory serves, this is your 3rd Doug Wright Award, and Canada is proud to have you.
What a fabulous award show! So many crazy, spontaneous moments, so much joy and delight from the winners. I don't know who won, of course. I'll know when I see it with you. But one good thing about this year's show is there's not a lot of people for the host to thank. No sponsors, no hotel, no festival. I do want to thank you, though, the people who made, wrote, published these books. I'm showing them to you because they might be hard to find. You can't go to bookstores, you can't go to conventions. So seek out these books online, get them from the authors, get them from the publishers. It's a fabulous bunch of books. I don't know if Koyama Press won anything this year, but as I understand it, it's Annie's last year. It's very sad. She said she's going out there to support authors in other ways, and that's great. But the only upside is it ends the Koyama stranglehold on the Doug Wright Award. So next year, anything goes. Stay cool until then. Keep clean. Good night.